Before we begin, imagine discovering that one of the most powerful health tools available to human beings costs absolutely nothing. No supplements, no expensive equipment, no miracle superfoods. In fact, it requires doing less, not more. What if many of the health problems people struggle with today, excess weight, unstable blood sugar, chronic fatigue, constant hunger, and even accelerated aging, are connected to one simple fact? We rarely allow our bodies to experience hunger anymore. And what if, by the end of this series, you could understand why some scientists believe that periods without food may activate ancient biological systems that helped human beings survive, adapt, and thrive for millions of years? Today, we begin a fascinating journey into the science of intermittent fasting, a journey that starts not in a modern laboratory, but deep in our evolutionary past. And before we dive in, if you enjoy science-based health content explained through stories and discoveries, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. This channel is still in its early stages, and every like, every subscription, and every bit of support genuinely helps us continue creating these in-depth documentaries. Thank you for being here. Now let's begin. Part 1. Why humans were never designed to eat all day. Take a look around the modern world. Food is everywhere. You can order it with a tap on a screen. You can buy it at gas stations, airports, office buildings, movie theaters, and vending machines. Many people eat from the moment they wake up until shortly before they go to bed. Breakfast, morning snack, lunch, afternoon snack, dinner, late night snack, and perhaps something sweet while watching television. For many people, going more than a few hours without food feels uncomfortable, unnatural, or even unhealthy. But here's a surprising question. What if this way of eating is actually the strange one? What if eating constantly is one of the newest behaviors in human history? To understand intermittent fasting, we must first understand the environment that shaped the human body. And that story begins millions of years ago. For nearly all of human evolution, food was uncertain. There were no refrigerators, no supermarkets, no delivery apps, no convenience stores open 24 hours a day. Our ancestors lived as hunter-gatherers. Some days were abundant. A successful hunt could provide large amounts of food. Wild fruits might be plentiful during certain seasons. Nuts, roots, and edible plants could be gathered from the surrounding landscape, but other days were very different. A hunt could fail, animals could migrate, weather could destroy food sources. Entire days might pass with very little to eat. From our modern perspective, this sounds difficult. Yet the human body adapted to these conditions extraordinarily well. In fact, it was shaped by them. Natural selection rewarded individuals who could survive periods of scarcity. The people who could function, think clearly, and remain physically capable without constant access to food were more likely to survive and pass their genes to future generations. Over thousands upon thousands of generations, the human body became remarkably flexible. It learned how to store energy when food was available, and it learned how to access that stored energy when food disappeared. This flexibility became one of humanity's greatest survival advantages. Think about it. If early humans became weak, confused, and exhausted every time they missed a meal, our species might never have survived. Instead, the opposite often happened. When food became scarce, the body activated powerful systems designed to help locate the next meal. Energy became available from stored body fat. Alertness increased. Focus sharpened. Motivation intensified. The body entered survival mode, not panic mode. This distinction is crucial. The human body did not evolve expecting constant feeding. It evolved expecting cycles, periods of eating, followed by periods of not eating, periods of abundance, followed by periods of scarcity. This rhythm existed for millions of years. Then something changed, and it changed very quickly. The agricultural revolution began altering human diets roughly 12,000 years ago. While this was a major event in human history, it represented only a tiny fraction of our evolutionary timeline. But an even more dramatic shift occurred during the last few centuries. Industrialization transformed food production. Mass agriculture increased supply. Food processing exploded. Preservation technologies improved. Transportation networks expanded. And eventually, food became available almost everywhere. For the first time in human history, large populations could access calories throughout the entire day. This abundance brought enormous benefits: fewer famines, greater food security, improved survival rates. Yet abundance also introduced new challenges. Many foods became highly processed. Manufacturers learned how to engineer products that were extremely appealing to the human brain. Sugar, salt, refined carbohydrates, artificial flavor combinations. Foods designed not merely to satisfy hunger, but to encourage continuous consumption. At the same time, cultural habits began changing. One of the most interesting examples is breakfast. Many people have heard the phrase, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Yet few people realize how strongly modern marketing helped popularize this belief. Throughout the 20th century, food companies promoted breakfast foods aggressively. Cereal manufacturers, advertisers, and nutrition campaigns helped establish eating patterns that many people now consider timeless traditions. But from an evolutionary perspective, eating immediately after waking is not necessarily a universal biological requirement. Human beings survived countless generations without boxed cereal, breakfast sandwiches, or sweet pastries. Meanwhile, snacking culture expanded dramatically. Food became entertainment. Food became comfort. Food became a response to boredom, stress, celebration, and even loneliness. Many people stopped eating because they were hungry. Instead, they started eating because food was available, and because the modern environment constantly encouraged them to do so. This brings us to another fascinating question. Why do we feel hungry so often? The answer is more complicated than most people realize. One important player is a hormone called ghrelin. Ghrelin is sometimes called the hunger hormone. When ghrelin levels rise, the brain receives signals that encourage eating. But researchers have discovered something surprising. Ghrelin follows patterns. If you usually eat lunch at noon, ghrelin often begins rising before noon arrives. If you skip lunch occasionally, those hunger signals may gradually adapt. In other words, part of hunger is biological, but part of hunger is learned. Your body develops expectations based on routine. This explains why many people feel hungry at specific times even when they have plenty of stored energy available. The body has learned the schedule. Now add modern advertising to the equation. Every day, people encounter thousands of food-related messages. Commercials, billboards, social media posts, product packaging, restaurant signs, streaming advertisements. The brain is constantly exposed to food cues, and each cue has the potential to stimulate desire, cravings, and appetite, even when genuine physical hunger is absent. Imagine walking through an airport. The smell of baked goods drifts through the air. Bright displays showcase desserts. Coffee shops offer sweet drinks. Screens advertise meals. Within minutes, a person who was not hungry may suddenly feel the urge to eat. This is not weakness. It is biology interacting with an environment unlike anything our ancestors ever experienced. The result is a profound mismatch. Our bodies evolved in a world where food was scarce. Our brains now live in a world where food is abundant. And the ancient systems designed to help us survive scarcity are being overwhelmed by constant abundance. For many people, this creates a cycle. Eat frequently. Insulin remains elevated. The body spends less time accessing stored energy. Hunger returns. More eating follows, and the cycle continues. But what happens when that cycle is interrupted? What happens when we intentionally create periods without food? What happens when we allow the body to do what it evolved to do? This question lies at the heart of intermittent fasting, and it is not merely a question about weight loss. It is a question about biology, about metabolism, about aging, about cellular repair, about the hidden systems that have been operating inside us for millions of years. The truth is that most people have never experienced what happens when the body fully transitions from constant feeding into one of its ancient fasting states. They stop eating for a few hours and assume nothing significant is occurring. Yet beneath the surface, an extraordinary transformation may already be beginning. Energy pathways start shifting. Hormones begin changing. Stored fuel becomes accessible. Ancient genetic programs awaken. And deep inside the body, a remarkable survival mechanism prepares to emerge. A mechanism so important that it would eventually help earn a Nobel Prize. But before we can understand that discovery, we must first answer a more immediate question. What exactly happens inside the human body after the last bite of food? How does the body know when to store energy? How does it know when to burn it? And what hidden switch allows humans to move between these two worlds? In the next chapter, we will follow a single meal through the body and uncover the secret survival switch that has been quietly protecting our species for millions of years, a switch that only appears when food disappears. Part 2. Decoding the body's hidden survival switch. Imagine that you have just finished a meal. Perhaps it was breakfast, perhaps it was lunch. The last bite disappears. The plate is empty. The meal feels over. But inside your body, an astonishing chain of events is only beginning. Most people never think about what happens next. Food goes in, life continues. The process seems simple, yet beneath the surface, trillions of cells immediately begin coordinating one of the most sophisticated energy management systems ever created by nature. And hidden within that system lies a remarkable survival switch. A switch that helped our ancestors survive periods of abundance and scarcity. A switch that may explain many of the health benefits associated with intermittent fasting. To understand it, we must follow the journey of a meal through time, hour by hour, step by step. And by the end of this chapter, you will see why the human body was never designed to depend on a constant stream of food. Let's begin at the moment immediately after eating. The food you consume is broken down inside the digestive system. Carbohydrates become glucose, proteins become amino acids, fats become fatty acids. These nutrients begin entering the bloodstream. As glucose levels rise, the pancreas responds. It releases a hormone called insulin. Insulin is one of the most important hormones in the human body. In many ways, insulin acts like a traffic controller. Its job is to tell cells that fuel has arrived. Energy is available. The feast has begun. Cells throughout the body open their doors to glucose. Muscles absorb it. Organs absorb it. The brain receives a steady supply. Meanwhile, the liver starts storing excess glucose for later use. This stored form of glucose is called glycogen. Think of glycogen as the body's short-term energy savings account. When glucose is abundant, glycogen reserves grow. At the same time, insulin sends another message: store energy, save what is not needed right now. If glycogen storage begins reaching capacity, some excess energy may eventually be converted into body fat. This is not a flaw, it is a survival mechanism. For millions of years, this ability helped humans survive famine. The body never knew when the next successful hunt would occur. Whenever food appeared, storing some of that energy was a smart strategy. In this fed state, the body focuses primarily on growth, repair, and storage. Energy is plentiful. Resources are available. There is no need to access emergency reserves. For several hours after eating, this remains the dominant metabolic state. The body is running on incoming fuel, but eventually something begins to change. The meal is over, digestion slows, glucose levels gradually decline, insulin starts falling, and the body quietly enters a new phase. Around 8 hours after eating, many people are sleeping. From the outside, nothing appears different. Yet internally, an important transition has begun. The body still requires energy. The heart continues beating. The lungs continue breathing. The brain continues working. Cells continue carrying out countless biological tasks. But now, the supply of incoming nutrients has slowed dramatically. The body must begin using stored resources. This is where glycogen becomes essential. The liver starts releasing glucose from its glycogen reserves. Stored energy begins flowing back into the bloodstream. The body is essentially withdrawing funds from its short-term savings account. For most healthy individuals, glycogen can provide energy for several hours. Exactly how long depends on factors such as activity level, muscle mass, diet, metabolic health, and individual biology. But eventually, glycogen stores begin shrinking. And this is where the story becomes truly fascinating. For most of human history, this moment occurred regularly. Food was not guaranteed. The body needed a backup plan, and evolution provided one. As glycogen levels decline, the body begins preparing for a metabolic shift. Scientists sometimes call this process a fuel switch. The body gradually transitions from relying primarily on glucose toward using stored fat as a major energy source. This shift often becomes more noticeable somewhere between 12 and 16 hours after the last meal, although timing varies between individuals. For many people practicing intermittent fasting, this window represents a significant turning point. The body begins moving away from storage mode and toward utilization mode. Instead of asking what food is available, the body begins asking what energy have we already stored. This question changes everything. Body fat is often misunderstood. Many people view fat as an enemy, a problem, something the body should not have. But from an evolutionary perspective, body fat is one of humanity's greatest survival inventions. Fat represents stored energy, a biological battery, a reserve fuel tank, a resource designed specifically for times when food is unavailable. When insulin levels remain elevated throughout the day due to constant eating, access to stored fat becomes more limited. But as insulin falls during fasting, fat becomes increasingly available. The body starts breaking down stored fat into smaller molecules that can be used for energy. And then something remarkable happens. The liver begins producing compounds known as ketones. Ketones are often discussed in nutrition circles, but they are frequently misunderstood. Some people associate ketones only with specialized diets. In reality, ketone production is a natural biological process. Humans have been producing ketones for hundreds of thousands of years, long before modern nutrition plans existed, long before supermarkets, long before agriculture. Ketones emerged because our ancestors needed a reliable backup fuel during periods without food, and ketones turned out to be extraordinarily effective, especially for the brain. The human brain consumes enormous amounts of energy. Despite representing only a small percentage of total body weight, it requires a disproportionate share of available fuel. Under normal conditions, much of that fuel comes from glucose. But when glucose availability decreases, ketones provide an alternative. And many researchers find this adaptation remarkable. The brain can function extremely well on ketones. In fact, many people report experiencing enhanced mental clarity during fasting periods. Sharper focus, improved concentration, a sense of sustained energy. Why might this occur? Scientists are still investigating the full picture, but several explanations exist. Unlike the rapid ups and downs sometimes associated with blood sugar fluctuations, ketones can provide a more stable fuel supply. Some research also suggests that ketones may influence signaling pathways involved in brain function and resilience. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes sense. Imagine an ancient hunter who had not eaten for a day. Would nature benefit from making that person mentally sluggish? Probably not. A hungry human needed to remain alert, attentive, capable of finding food. The brain needed to perform at a high level during periods of scarcity, and ketones may have played an important role in supporting that capability. This brings us to one of the most exciting ideas in modern fasting research, a concept championed by neuroscientist Mark Mattson. It is called cyclic metabolic switching. The name sounds complicated, but the underlying idea is surprisingly simple. Human beings evolved to alternate between two biological states, the fed state and the fasted state. For most of modern life, many people spend nearly all their time in the fed state. Food arrives constantly. Breakfast follows sleep. Lunch follows breakfast. Dinner follows lunch. Snacks fill the spaces in between. The body rarely needs to activate the biological programs associated with fasting. According to the concept of cyclic metabolic switching, regularly transitioning between these states may provide important physiological benefits. The body does not merely tolerate these shifts. It may actually be designed for them. In the fed state, growth pathways become active. Nutrients are plentiful. Storage processes operate efficiently. In the fasted state, a different set of adaptations begins emerging. Stored energy becomes available. Cellular stress resistance may increase. Repair mechanisms may become more active. Metabolic flexibility improves. The body practices switching between fuel sources. This flexibility may be one of the hallmarks of metabolic health. Think of it like a hybrid vehicle. A healthy hybrid can smoothly switch between energy systems when needed. Likewise, a metabolically healthy body can efficiently move between glucose utilization and fat utilization. Problems can arise when one system dominates continuously. The modern environment often encourages constant feeding. As a result, many people rarely challenge their metabolic flexibility. The fasting period disappears. The ancient cycle becomes incomplete, and the body may lose some of the adaptive benefits that accompanied those transitions throughout human history. This does not mean fasting is magic. It does not mean every person must follow the same schedule. And it certainly does not mean that food is the enemy. Rather, it suggests that timing may matter more than many people realize. The human body appears to have evolved expecting rhythm, a cycle, periods of nourishment, followed by periods of rest from nourishment, a dance between abundance and scarcity, a biological pattern repeated over millions of years. And when that pattern reappears, ancient systems begin waking up. At first, the changes are invisible. Insulin falls, glycogen decreases, fat burning increases, ketones emerge, fuel sources shift, the survival switch turns on. But these are only the earliest layers of the story, because deep beneath the surface, something even more extraordinary is beginning. While the body changes how it produces energy, trillions of cells start preparing for a massive cleanup operation. Old components are identified, damaged structures are targeted, cellular waste begins attracting attention. It is as if every cell contains its own maintenance crew, patiently waiting for the right signal to begin restoring order. And that signal becomes stronger when food disappears. In the next chapter, we will explore the Nobel Prize-winning discovery that transformed our understanding of fasting forever. Because switching to fat burning is only the outer layer of the story. Far deeper inside, trillions of cells are beginning a strange and remarkable process of biological housekeeping. Part 3. The Nobel Prize discovery that changed how we see hunger. Imagine walking into a city that has never cleaned its streets. Day after day, trash accumulates. Broken machines remain abandoned. Damaged vehicles pile up. Nothing is removed, nothing is repaired, nothing is recycled. At first, the city might still function, but over time, the growing clutter would begin causing problems everywhere. Traffic would slow, infrastructure would weaken, resources would be wasted. Eventually, the city would become overwhelmed by its own debris. Now imagine the same problem happening inside the human body. Not in one cell, not in 1,000 cells, but in the trillions of cells that make up every organ, tissue, and system within you. Every second of every day, your cells perform countless biological tasks. Proteins are built, energy is produced, molecules are transported, DNA is read and copied. But this constant activity creates an unavoidable problem. Things wear out, proteins become damaged, cellular structures age, tiny biological machines stop functioning properly, waste accumulates. If the body had no way to remove these damaged components, life itself would become impossible. Fortunately, evolution developed a solution, and for decades, scientists knew the solution existed. The mystery was understanding exactly how it worked. The answer would eventually lead to one of the most important biological discoveries of the modern era, and it would bring worldwide attention to a relatively unknown Japanese scientist named Yoshinori Ohsumi. At the time, few people outside scientific circles had heard his name. He was not a celebrity researcher, he did not dominate headlines, he was simply a scientist driven by curiosity. The kind of person willing to spend years investigating questions that many others overlooked. During the 1980s and 1990s, Ohsumi became fascinated by a strange process occurring inside cells. Scientists had observed hints of it before. Tiny structures appeared to surround cellular material and transport it for breakdown. But the process remained poorly understood. Many important details were still missing. To investigate the mystery, Ohsumi turned to an unlikely subject: yeast. At first glance, yeast may seem far removed from human biology. It is microscopic, simple, hardly the organism most people would choose to study when trying to understand human health. But scientists have long known that yeast shares many fundamental biological mechanisms with human cells. In some ways, studying yeast is like examining a simplified version of life's instruction manual. Ohsumi designed a series of elegant experiments. His goal was to identify the genes responsible for this mysterious cellular recycling process. The work was painstaking, time-consuming, often frustrating, yet the results were extraordinary. He successfully identified key genetic mechanisms that controlled the process. For the first time, scientists began understanding how cells break down and recycle their own components. The process became known as autophagy. The word comes from Greek roots meaning self-eating. At first, the term sounds alarming. Self-eating. It almost sounds destructive, dangerous, as if cells are attacking themselves. But the reality is very different. Autophagy is not an act of destruction. It is an act of renewal, a form of biological housekeeping, a sophisticated recycling system that allows cells to remove damaged components and recover valuable building materials. Imagine a homeowner cleaning out a garage. Broken tools are discarded. Old equipment is dismantled. Useful parts are salvaged. Space is cleared. The entire environment becomes more efficient. Autophagy operates in a remarkably similar way. Inside every cell, specialized structures identify worn-out components, damaged proteins, faulty machinery, aging cellular parts. These materials are enclosed within membrane structures and delivered to cellular recycling centers called lysosomes. There, they are broken down into reusable pieces. Those pieces can then be repurposed to support new cellular construction. Nothing is wasted. The system is astonishingly efficient. Nature rarely throws valuable resources away. Instead, it recycles them, again and again and again. The more scientists studied autophagy, the more important it appeared. This was not some obscure biological curiosity. It was a fundamental survival mechanism, a process found throughout the natural world, a process essential for maintaining cellular health. But what exactly gets recycled? The answer reveals why autophagy has attracted so much attention from aging researchers. Let's begin with proteins. Proteins are among the most important molecules in the body. They perform countless functions. Some act as enzymes, some transport materials, some provide structure, some help cells communicate. Yet proteins are not permanent. Over time, they become damaged, misfolded, less effective. Imagine trying to run a factory using worn-out tools. Efficiency would decline, mistakes would increase, performance would suffer. Autophagy helps identify and remove these damaged proteins before they accumulate excessively. But proteins are only part of the story. Another major target involves structures called mitochondria. Often described as the power plants of the cell, mitochondria generate much of the energy required for life. Every heartbeat, every thought, every movement, every breath, all depend on energy produced by mitochondria. Yet mitochondria age just like everything else. Over time, some become damaged and less efficient. They may even begin producing harmful byproducts. If defective mitochondria accumulate, cellular performance can suffer. Fortunately, cells possess a specialized form of autophagy known as mitophagy. This process specifically targets aging mitochondria for removal and recycling. Think of it as replacing worn-out batteries before they start causing problems. The result is a healthier and more efficient cellular environment. Autophagy also helps remove other forms of cellular debris, fragments of damaged structures, unwanted materials, biological clutter that would otherwise accumulate over time. In many ways, autophagy functions like an internal maintenance crew working around the clock. Most of the time, we are completely unaware of its activity. Yet our health may depend on it. This raises an important question. Why has autophagy become so closely associated with fasting? The answer lies in resource management. When nutrients are abundant, cells focus heavily on growth and construction. Materials are readily available. Energy is plentiful. Expansion becomes the priority. But when nutrients become scarce, cells shift strategies. Survival becomes more important than growth. Efficiency becomes critical. The cell begins asking a simple question: what resources do we already have? Autophagy helps answer that question. By recycling existing materials, cells can continue functioning even when external resources are limited. This is one reason fasting has attracted scientific interest. Periods without food appear to influence pathways associated with autophagy. Researchers continue investigating exactly how these relationships work in humans. The science is still evolving, but the connection between nutrient availability and cellular recycling has become one of the most fascinating areas in modern biology. The implications extend far beyond energy production. Many scientists believe autophagy may play a role in aging itself. To understand why, imagine two houses. One receives regular maintenance. Broken parts are replaced, damage is repaired, clutter is removed. The other receives no maintenance at all. Year after year, deterioration accumulates. Which house is likely to remain functional longer? The answer seems obvious. Some researchers view aging through a similar lens. Cells experience wear and tear throughout life. The ability to identify and remove damaged components may influence how well tissues continue functioning over time. This does not mean autophagy is a magical anti-aging switch. Human aging is extraordinarily complex. Many factors contribute: genetics, environment, lifestyle, nutrition, sleep, physical activity, and countless biological processes. Yet autophagy appears to be one important piece of the puzzle. Researchers are also exploring connections between impaired autophagy and chronic disease. Some studies suggest that disruptions in cellular recycling may contribute to neurodegenerative disorders. Others investigate links to metabolic dysfunction, inflammation, cardiovascular disease, and age-related decline. Again, much remains under investigation. Science rarely offers simple answers, but one pattern continues emerging. Healthy cellular maintenance appears to matter a great deal. Unfortunately, the growing popularity of fasting has also created misunderstandings. Social media often presents autophagy as a simple on-off switch. Fast for a specific number of hours. Autophagy instantly activates. Cells suddenly become young again. Problem solved. Reality is far more complicated. Autophagy exists on a spectrum. It is not merely off one moment and fully activated the next. Different tissues may respond differently. Individual biology matters. Age matters. Nutrition matters. Activity levels matter. Health status matters. Scientists are still working to understand precisely how autophagy behaves under different conditions. There is no universally accepted hour at which autophagy suddenly begins. The process is dynamic, complex, and highly regulated. Another misconception involves the idea that more fasting is always better. Biology rarely works that way. Both excessive feeding and excessive restriction can create problems. The goal is not permanent deprivation. The goal is balance. Human physiology evolved around cycles, periods of nourishment, periods of scarcity, periods of growth, periods of repair. The most important lesson from autophagy may not be that hunger is beneficial. It may be that the body possesses remarkable self-maintenance systems that require the right conditions to function optimally. For decades, many people viewed fasting simply as the absence of eating, a passive state, a period when nothing important happened. Ohsumi's work helped change that perspective forever. When food disappears, the body does not shut down. It adapts, it reorganizes, it repairs, it recycles. It reveals capabilities that remained hidden during times of abundance. This discovery transformed how scientists think about cellular health, and it opened entirely new avenues of research into aging, metabolism, and disease. Yet perhaps the most fascinating question remains unanswered. If fasting influences processes that help maintain cellular health, if cells become more efficient at cleaning and recycling themselves, if biological housekeeping improves beneath the surface, then what happens at the level we can actually see? What changes occur in body weight, in appearance, in energy levels, in metabolic health, in the visible signs of aging? In the next chapter, we move from the microscopic world of cells to one of the most obvious and widely discussed effects of intermittent fasting. Because if cells are becoming renewed on the inside, what happens to the body on the outside? Part 4, the fat loss battle. What really happens when you fast? Imagine that you are carrying around a backpack filled with emergency supplies. Food, water, tools, everything needed to survive an unexpected crisis. Now imagine that every day someone keeps handing you fresh supplies before you ever need to open the backpack. Breakfast arrives, then a snack, then lunch, then another snack, then dinner, then dessert. The backpack remains untouched. Its contents sit there unused, month after month, year after year. Eventually, you might forget the backpack even exists. In many ways, body fat functions like that backpack. It is stored energy, a reserve fuel supply, an emergency resource that evolved to help human beings survive periods when food was unavailable. Yet in the modern world, many people rarely give their bodies a reason to open that reserve tank. And this simple fact may help explain one of the greatest frustrations in modern health. Why do so many people struggle to lose weight? Every year, millions of people begin a new diet. They count calories, buy meal plans, download fitness apps, eliminate entire food groups, follow the latest trends, and for a few weeks, many see progress. The scale moves, hope rises, motivation grows, then something happens. Weight loss slows or stops or reverses entirely. The lost pounds return, sometimes bringing friends with them. This cycle is so common that researchers have spent decades trying to understand it. And while many factors contribute, one important reason may be that most people focus only on calories. They rarely think about hormones. Yet hormones play a massive role in determining what the body does with energy. And among those hormones, one stands above the rest: insulin. We first met insulin in the previous chapter. After a meal, insulin rises. Its primary job is to help move nutrients into cells. But insulin has another important function. It acts as a storage signal. When insulin is elevated, the body receives a message. Energy is abundant. Store fuel. Save resources. Build reserves. From an evolutionary perspective, this is brilliant. Imagine a hunter-gatherer stumbling upon a large source of food after several days of scarcity. The body would be wise to save some of that energy for later. Insulin helps make that possible. The problem is not insulin itself. The problem may arise when insulin remains elevated for long periods. In the modern environment, many people eat almost continuously. A sugary coffee in the morning, a snack during the commute, lunch, another snack, a sports drink, dinner, dessert, late-night treats. Each eating event can stimulate insulin production. The result is that the body may spend much of the day receiving storage signals. The emergency fuel tank remains largely untouched. And this leads us to one of the central ideas behind intermittent fasting. When food intake stops for a period of time, insulin levels gradually decline. As insulin falls, the body's willingness to access stored energy begins increasing. The locked door to the fuel tank starts opening. This does not mean fat suddenly melts away. The process is more gradual than that. But the biological environment begins shifting. Instead of prioritizing storage, the body becomes increasingly willing to utilize what it has already saved. Think back to our ancient ancestors. If the body could only burn incoming food, survival would have been impossible. Periods without food would have been catastrophic. Instead, evolution created a flexible system capable of switching fuel sources. When food is present, use food. When food is absent, use stored energy. Simple, elegant, effective. But when exactly does fat burning begin? The answer is more complicated than most people expect. Many people imagine a dramatic switch. One moment the body is burning glucose, the next moment it is burning fat. Reality is far more gradual. Even after eating, the body continues using a mixture of fuels. Fat burning never completely stops. Likewise, glucose use never completely disappears. What changes is the proportion. As fasting continues, the body gradually relies more heavily on stored fat. This shift often becomes more noticeable as glycogen stores decline. Insulin falls. Fatty acids are released from fat tissue. The liver begins converting some of those fatty acids into ketones, and the body increasingly taps into its reserve energy supply. This process is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that the system is functioning exactly as intended. For millions of years, this metabolic flexibility helped humans survive unpredictable environments. Today, intermittent fasting simply recreates part of that ancient pattern. At this point, many people hear the word ketones and immediately think about the ketogenic diet. This raises an important question. Are intermittent fasting and a ketogenic diet the same thing? The answer is no. Although they share some biological similarities, they are not identical. A ketogenic diet focuses primarily on food composition. The goal is to consume very low amounts of carbohydrates while increasing fat intake. This nutritional approach encourages the body to produce ketones even while eating regularly. Intermittent fasting approaches the problem differently. Instead of changing what is eaten, it changes when food is eaten. Ketones may still appear, but they emerge because the body is spending time without incoming nutrients. One strategy focuses on dietary composition. The other focuses on meal timing. Some individuals combine both approaches. Others use only one. But it is important to understand that natural ketosis during fasting is a normal physiological response. Humans have been entering mild fasting-related ketosis throughout evolutionary history, long before anyone invented modern diet plans, long before social media influencers, long before nutrition books filled store shelves. Ketosis is not a modern invention. It is an ancient survival mechanism, and for many people, it feels surprisingly different from what they expect. One common assumption is that fasting inevitably causes weakness and exhaustion, yet many individuals report the opposite. After the initial adaptation period, they describe steadier energy levels, reduced hunger, improved focus, a greater sense of control around food. Of course, experiences vary. Not everyone responds identically. Human biology is wonderfully complex. But these reports have inspired researchers to investigate fasting more closely. And what they have found is fascinating. Over the past several decades, Numerous studies have examined intermittent fasting and weight loss. The results are encouraging, but they are also more nuanced than many advertisements suggest. In many studies, participants practicing intermittent fasting lose weight. Often, they lose body fat. Improvements in waist circumference are commonly observed. Some metabolic markers improve as well. Yet, one of the most important lessons from the research is that intermittent fasting is not magic. It does not override the laws of biology. It does not guarantee unlimited weight loss. It does not allow people to consume endless amounts of unhealthy food and remain lean. This may sound obvious, yet marketing often tells a different story. Many advertisements imply that fasting is a secret shortcut, a hack, a miracle solution, something that effortlessly melts away decades of excess weight. Science paints a more realistic picture. Intermittent fasting can be an effective tool, but it remains a tool, not a miracle. One reason it works for many people is surprisingly simple. Restricting the eating window often reduces total calorie intake naturally. When fewer hours are available for eating, some people consume less food without consciously trying to diet. Others experience improved appetite regulation. Some find it easier to avoid constant snacking. The result can be a sustainable reduction in energy intake. At the same time, fasting influences hormones and metabolic pathways that may support fat utilization. This combination helps explain why many individuals achieve meaningful results. But expectations matter. Healthy fat loss is usually slower than advertisements promise. Real transformation often occurs over months rather than weeks. The body is not a machine that can be forced into rapid change without consequences. Sustainable progress requires patience, consistency, and realistic goals. Another important lesson from the research is that weight alone does not tell the entire story. Imagine two people who lose the same amount of weight. One loses mostly body fat. The other loses significant muscle mass as well. The number on the scale may look identical, yet the outcomes are very different. This is why researchers increasingly focus on body composition rather than weight alone. The goal is not merely becoming lighter. The goal is becoming healthier, stronger, more metabolically resilient. And this brings us back to a fundamental truth. Body fat is not the enemy. Excess body fat can create health challenges. But fat itself is an essential and normal part of human biology. The real objective is balance, a healthy relationship between energy intake and energy utilization, a healthy relationship between feeding and fasting, a healthy relationship between abundance and restraint. Intermittent fasting attempts to restore some of that balance, not by starving the body, but by allowing it to access systems that evolved long before the modern food environment existed. And the results extend far beyond appearance. Weight loss is often the first thing people notice because it is visible. The mirror reflects it, the scale measures it, clothes fit differently, friends comment on it. But beneath the surface, changes are occurring that may be even more important. Because while body fat decreases, another transformation is unfolding inside the bloodstream itself. Glucose regulation begins changing. Insulin sensitivity may improve. Metabolic markers start shifting. And some researchers believe these invisible changes may ultimately matter more than the numbers on a scale. In the next chapter, we will explore one of the most important health challenges of the modern era. A silent metabolic problem affecting hundreds of millions of people around the world. A problem closely connected to insulin, blood sugar, and the way we eat. Because fat loss may be the most visible effect of intermittent fasting, but some of the most remarkable changes are happening in the blood. Part 5. The silent enemy: blood sugar, insulin, and prediabetes. Imagine a disease that can quietly develop for years. No pain, no dramatic symptoms, no obvious warning signs. You wake up, go to work, spend time with family, live what feels like a normal life. Meanwhile, beneath the surface, a slow biological shift is taking place. A shift that may eventually affect your heart, your brain, your kidneys, your eyesight, your energy levels, and your lifespan. This hidden threat is not some rare medical condition. It is one of the fastest growing health problems on Earth, and many people do not even know they have it. Welcome to the world of metabolic disease. For most of human history, infectious diseases were among humanity's greatest enemies. Today, in many parts of the world, a different challenge has emerged: chronic metabolic dysfunction. Researchers often describe modern society as facing a global metabolic epidemic. Rates of obesity have climbed dramatically. Type 2 diabetes has increased across continents. Prediabetes affects hundreds of millions of people, and many experts believe the problem is still growing. What makes this situation especially concerning is that metabolic disease often develops slowly. Years may pass before a diagnosis occurs. Long before diabetes appears, subtle warning signs are already emerging. Insulin levels begin changing. Blood sugar regulation becomes less efficient. Cells gradually lose their sensitivity to important hormonal signals. The body starts struggling to manage energy properly. To understand how this happens, we need to revisit one of the most important hormones in human biology: insulin. Insulin is frequently misunderstood. Many people think of it only in connection with diabetes. But insulin influences nearly every moment of our lives. Every time you eat carbohydrates, glucose enters the bloodstream. The body carefully monitors this process. Too little glucose can be dangerous. Too much glucose can also cause harm. The body therefore requires a sophisticated control system. Insulin serves as one of the primary regulators of that system. Imagine insulin as a messenger carrying an important announcement. Fuel has arrived. Energy is available. Open the doors. When insulin is released by the pancreas, cells receive the signal to absorb glucose from the bloodstream. Muscle cells absorb it. Liver cells absorb it. Fat cells absorb it. The result is a reduction in blood sugar levels and a safe distribution of energy throughout the body. Under healthy conditions, this process works beautifully. The body maintains balance. Energy flows where it is needed. Blood sugar remains within an appropriate range. The system is elegant, efficient, and remarkably precise. But problems begin when cells stop listening. Imagine that you live next to a train station. At first, every passing train grabs your attention. The noise feels impossible to ignore. But after months or years, something changes. Your brain adapts. The sound fades into the background. You become less responsive to it. A similar phenomenon may occur with insulin. When insulin levels remain elevated frequently and repeatedly, cells can gradually become less sensitive to its message. Scientists call this insulin resistance. Insulin resistance represents one of the most important concepts in metabolic health. The message is still being sent, but the receiving cells are no longer responding as effectively. As resistance develops, the body attempts to compensate. The pancreas releases even more insulin. Higher insulin levels become necessary to achieve the same result. For a while, this strategy works. Blood sugar may remain within normal limits. Everything appears fine. But beneath the surface, the system is working harder and harder to maintain balance. The pancreas is pressing the accelerator. The cells are becoming less responsive. The biological machinery is under increasing strain. This stage often precedes prediabetes. And because the process develops gradually, many people never notice it happening. One reason insulin resistance attracts so much attention is that it may help explain a common modern complaint: chronic fatigue. Think about how many people describe their daily experience. They wake up tired, need caffeine to function, experience energy crashes during the afternoon, feel hungry every few hours, depend on snacks to maintain focus, then struggle with cravings later in the evening. Many factors can contribute to fatigue: poor sleep, stress, medical conditions, nutritional deficiencies. But unstable blood sugar may also play a role. When people eat frequently throughout the day, especially highly processed foods rich in refined carbohydrates and added sugars, blood sugar can rise rapidly. Insulin responds. Blood sugar falls. Hunger returns. Another meal or snack follows. The cycle repeats. Over time, many individuals become trapped on what some experts describe as a metabolic roller coaster. Short bursts of energy, followed by crashes. Temporary satisfaction, followed by renewed cravings. The body spends much of the day reacting to incoming fuel rather than efficiently managing energy reserves. This is one reason intermittent fasting has attracted scientific interest. Researchers wanted to know whether periods without food could improve the body's ability to regulate glucose and insulin. The findings have been intriguing. Across numerous studies, intermittent fasting has demonstrated potential benefits for blood sugar control in many individuals. Researchers have observed improvements in insulin sensitivity, reductions in fasting insulin levels, better glucose regulation, and improvements in certain metabolic markers. Importantly, results vary. Not every study shows identical outcomes. Not every participant responds the same way. Human biology is wonderfully diverse, yet a consistent pattern continues emerging. Giving the body regular periods without food may allow insulin levels to remain lower for longer periods, and that may help restore some metabolic flexibility. Think of it like giving an overworked employee a chance to recover. If a machine operates 24 hours a day without interruption, wear and tear accumulate, but periodic rest allows maintenance and recovery. Likewise, periods without eating may provide the body's metabolic systems with an opportunity to reset and recalibrate. This becomes especially important when discussing prediabetes. Prediabetes is exactly what the name suggests, a state that exists before diabetes develops. Blood sugar levels are higher than normal, but not yet high enough for a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. Millions of people have prediabetes. Many are completely unaware of it. The condition often produces few obvious symptoms, yet the underlying biological changes are already underway. Insulin resistance may be increasing. Blood sugar regulation may be deteriorating. Cardiovascular risk may be rising. Without intervention, some individuals eventually progress to type 2 diabetes. The encouraging news is that prediabetes is often reversible. Lifestyle changes can have a profound impact. Weight loss, physical activity, improved nutrition, and better sleep all play important roles. Intermittent fasting has emerged as one possible tool within that broader strategy. Consider a hypothetical example. Imagine a person who spends years eating from early morning until late evening, breakfast at 7, snack at 10, lunch at noon, snack at 3, dinner at 7, dessert at 9. The body's insulin system rarely receives a break. Now imagine that same person gradually adopts a moderate fasting schedule, perhaps a 12-hour eating window, then a 14-hour fasting period, eventually a 16-hour fasting period. Suddenly, the metabolic landscape changes. Insulin spends more time at lower levels. Stored energy becomes more accessible. The body begins practicing fuel switching again. Not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily. Researchers studying intermittent fasting often observe that some improvements begin appearing within a matter of weeks. Fasting insulin levels may decline. Glucose control may improve. Some participants report reduced hunger. Others describe more stable energy throughout the day. Cravings may diminish. Mental clarity may improve. Again, individual experiences differ. Intermittent fasting is not a universal solution, but these observations help explain why scientists continue investigating its potential. Perhaps one of the most surprising findings reported by many people practicing intermittent fasting is that hunger often becomes less intense over time. At first, this seems counterintuitive. Shouldn't fasting make people hungrier? Initially, it often does. The body is adapting to a new routine. Habitual mealtimes trigger expectations. Hormones respond. But as metabolic flexibility improves, many individuals discover that they are no longer thinking about food every hour. The constant cycle of cravings begins easing. The body becomes more comfortable accessing stored energy. This adaptation can feel liberating. For the first time in years, some people realize they are eating because they choose to eat, not because they are trapped in a cycle of fluctuating blood sugar and relentless cravings. Of course, fasting alone cannot solve every metabolic problem. Food quality still matters. Sleep still matters. Exercise still matters. Stress management still matters. Human health is never determined by a single factor. Yet the timing of eating may be far more important than previous generations of scientists once believed. And this realization is reshaping how researchers think about metabolic health. The story becomes even more fascinating when we look beyond blood sugar. Because the same metabolic improvements that benefit glucose regulation may also influence another critical system, the cardiovascular system, the heart. Every beat depends on the quality of the biological environment surrounding it. Inflammation matters. Blood pressure matters. Blood sugar matters. Insulin matters. And as these factors begin improving, something remarkable may happen. The benefits extend far beyond metabolism alone. In the next chapter, we will explore why many researchers believe the heart may be one of the biggest beneficiaries of intermittent fasting. Because when blood sugar becomes more stable, the heart begins to notice the difference as well. Part 6. Your heart likes fasting more than you think. Imagine that your heart is the hardest working muscle in your body. It never takes a vacation. It never sleeps. It never asks for a day off. Every second, every minute, every hour, every year of your life. It continues beating, moving blood through nearly 100,000 kilometers of blood vessels, delivering oxygen, transporting nutrients, removing waste, keeping every organ alive. And yet, despite its incredible importance, the heart is surprisingly vulnerable to the choices we make every day. What we eat, how often we eat, how much we sleep, how much stress we carry, how physically active we are. All of these factors gradually shape the environment in which the heart must operate. For decades, most conversations about heart disease focused on obvious culprits: smoking, high cholesterol, lack of exercise. While these remain important, scientists have increasingly discovered that the story is far more complex. The heart does not function in isolation. It is deeply connected to metabolism, blood sugar, inflammation, hormones, and perhaps surprisingly, meal timing. To understand why intermittent fasting has attracted attention from cardiovascular researchers, we must first understand one fundamental truth. The heart responds not only to what we eat, it also responds to how frequently we eat. Let's begin with food itself. Imagine pouring thick mud into a river every day. At first, the river continues flowing, but over time, the water becomes less clean. The ecosystem becomes stressed. The entire system begins operating under increasingly difficult conditions. Something similar can happen within the human body. Highly processed foods, excess added sugars, constant overeating, poor metabolic health. These factors can gradually create a biological environment that places stress on the cardiovascular system. Not because a single meal is dangerous, but because years of repeated exposure can alter how the body functions. One of the most important mechanisms involved is inflammation. Most people hear the word inflammation and think about injury, a swollen ankle, a cut finger, a sore throat. This type of inflammation is normal, helpful, protective. It is part of the body's healing process. But there is another type of inflammation, a quieter type, a slower type, one that can persist for years. Scientists call it chronic low-grade inflammation. Unlike acute inflammation, chronic inflammation often operates beneath conscious awareness. You do not necessarily feel it. You may not notice obvious symptoms. Yet researchers increasingly view it as a major contributor to many age-related diseases, including cardiovascular disease. Imagine a small fire smoldering continuously inside a building, not large enough to destroy the structure immediately, but never fully extinguished. Year after year, the damage accumulates. This analogy helps explain why chronic inflammation concerns researchers. The cardiovascular system is particularly sensitive to this process. Inflammation can influence blood vessels, affect arterial function, contribute to plaque development, and increase overall cardiovascular risk. So where does fasting enter the picture? One reason scientists became interested in intermittent fasting is that several studies have suggested potential reductions in inflammatory markers. The exact mechanisms remain under investigation, but improvements in insulin sensitivity, body composition, and metabolic health may help create a less inflammatory environment. The body begins shifting away from constant nutrient processing, metabolic stress decreases, and some inflammatory pathways may become less active. This does not mean fasting eliminates inflammation entirely, nor does it replace other healthy habits. But researchers continue exploring its potential role within a broader cardiovascular strategy. Another area of interest involves blood pressure. Blood pressure is often called the silent killer. For a simple reason, many people have elevated blood pressure without realizing it. There may be no obvious symptoms, no warning signs, no pain. Meanwhile, the cardiovascular system experiences increasing strain. Imagine attaching a garden hose to a faucet. Now increase the water pressure far beyond what the hose was designed to handle. The hose might survive for a while, but the additional stress eventually takes its toll. Something similar can happen within blood vessels. Persistently elevated pressure forces the cardiovascular system to work harder. Over years or decades, the consequences can become significant. Researchers studying intermittent fasting have observed that some individuals experience modest improvements in blood pressure. Why might this happen? Several possibilities exist. Weight loss often contributes. Improved insulin sensitivity may play a role. Reduced inflammation may help. Changes in nervous system activity may also be involved. As with many areas of fasting research, the answer is likely multifactorial. Multiple biological pathways appear to interact simultaneously. The heart rarely responds to a single variable. Instead, it responds to the overall environment, and that environment may become healthier when metabolic function improves. Next, we arrive at one of the most debated topics in cardiovascular science: cholesterol. Few health topics generate more confusion. For years, cholesterol was portrayed as the primary villain of heart disease. Then new research added complexity to the story. Today, scientists recognize that cholesterol is neither entirely good nor entirely bad. In fact, cholesterol is essential for life. Every cell membrane depends on it. Many hormones require it. The body produces cholesterol because it serves critical functions. The question is not whether cholesterol exists. The question is how cholesterol is transported and managed within the body. This is where different lipoproteins enter the discussion. Alongside cholesterol, researchers also pay close attention to triglycerides. Triglycerides represent another form of circulating energy storage. When triglyceride levels remain elevated, cardiovascular risk often increases. Interestingly, many studies examining intermittent fasting have reported improvements in triglyceride levels. Some participants also experience favorable changes in cholesterol-related markers. Not always, not universally, but often enough to attract scientific attention. Why might this occur? One explanation involves the body's changing relationship with stored energy. As fasting periods increase, fat utilization becomes more common. Insulin levels spend more time at lower levels. Metabolic flexibility improves. The body becomes more efficient at handling fuel. Again, this is not magic. It is physiology. The heart appears to benefit when the broader metabolic system functions more effectively. But inflammation and cholesterol are only part of the story. There is another invisible force affecting cardiovascular health, a process called oxidative stress. The term sounds technical, yet the concept is surprisingly straightforward. Every day, the body generates energy. This process is essential for life. However, energy production also creates reactive molecules known as free radicals. In appropriate amounts, these molecules serve important functions. But when they accumulate excessively, they can damage proteins, lipids, and DNA. Imagine leaving a metal bicycle outside in the rain for years. Gradually, rust begins appearing. The bicycle deteriorates. Oxidative stress operates somewhat like biological rust, a slow accumulation of damage occurring over time. The body possesses sophisticated antioxidant defenses designed to manage this challenge. But those defenses are not limitless. Researchers have become increasingly interested in whether fasting influences pathways involved in oxidative stress resistance. Some studies suggest that fasting may activate adaptive stress response mechanisms. Essentially, the body responds to temporary nutritional stress by strengthening certain protective systems. This concept is sometimes referred to as hormesis, a fascinating biological principle, the idea that mild, manageable challenges can stimulate beneficial adaptations. Exercise provides a classic example. A workout temporarily stresses the body, yet the result is often increased strength and resilience. Some researchers believe fasting may operate through similar mechanisms, not because starvation is beneficial, but because brief, controlled periods without food may encourage the body to activate protective responses. This brings us to some of the most intriguing cardiovascular research conducted over recent decades. Scientists examining fasting have reported associations with improvements in multiple cardiovascular risk factors: body weight, waist circumference, blood pressure, insulin sensitivity, inflammatory markers, triglycerides, metabolic flexibility. Individually, each change may appear modest, but together, they create a compelling picture. The heart rarely benefits from a single dramatic intervention. More often, it benefits from dozens of small improvements occurring simultaneously. Slightly lower blood pressure, slightly better glucose control, slightly reduced inflammation, slightly healthier body composition. Over years, these changes can add up. This may be one reason cardiovascular researchers remain interested in intermittent fasting. Not because it is a miracle, but because it influences multiple interconnected systems at the same time. The body is not a collection of separate parts. Everything is connected. Metabolism influences inflammation. Inflammation influences blood vessels. Blood vessels influence the heart. The heart influences every organ. And when one system improves, others often improve as well. Perhaps the most fascinating realization emerging from modern fasting research is that the benefits may extend far beyond body weight. Many people begin fasting hoping to lose fat, and that can certainly happen. But beneath the surface, a much larger story unfolds. The bloodstream changes, hormones change, inflammation changes, energy metabolism changes, the cardiovascular environment changes, and the heart quietly enjoys the benefits. Yet as impressive as these cardiovascular effects may be, some researchers believe another organ may benefit even more. An organ that consumes extraordinary amounts of energy. An organ that helped humans survive periods of scarcity throughout evolutionary history. An organ whose performance shapes memory, focus, creativity, and intelligence itself. Because the organ that may benefit most from fasting is not the heart. It may be the brain. Part 7. The hungry brain, the forgotten superpower. Imagine waking up thousands of years ago. The sun rises over an open landscape. You have not eaten since the previous day. There is no refrigerator waiting in the next room. No grocery store around the corner. No food delivery service. No guarantee that breakfast exists. Your survival depends on finding food. Now ask yourself a simple question. In that situation, what kind of brain would nature favor? Would evolution reward a brain that becomes sluggish, confused, and exhausted whenever food is scarce? Would a hunter survive very long if hunger immediately destroyed concentration? Probably not. In fact, the opposite would make far more sense. A hungry human would need sharper senses, better memory, greater awareness, faster decision-making, more motivation, more focus. The individual capable of thinking clearly during scarcity would be more likely to find food, survive, and pass on their genes. This idea lies at the heart of one of the most fascinating questions in modern neuroscience. What if hunger is not merely a state of deprivation? What if, under certain conditions, the fasting brain becomes optimized for performance? For decades, many people assumed that going without food automatically reduced mental function. The logic seemed obvious. The brain needs fuel. Food provides fuel. Therefore, less food must mean less brain power. Yet biology is rarely that simple. And as researchers began studying fasting more closely, they discovered something surprising. The human brain appears to possess remarkable adaptations that activate during periods without food. To understand why, we must revisit one of the most important molecules we encountered earlier in this series: ketones. When glycogen stores begin declining and the body shifts toward burning fat, the liver starts producing ketones. These molecules serve as an alternative fuel source, and one of their most important destinations is the brain. The human brain is extraordinarily expensive to operate. Although it represents only a small percentage of total body weight, it consumes a tremendous amount of energy. Every thought, every memory, every emotion, every decision, every creative insight, all require fuel. Under typical conditions, much of that fuel comes from glucose. But when food becomes scarce, the brain does not simply shut down. Instead, it begins using ketones. And this adaptation may be one of the most remarkable survival strategies in human evolution. Researchers have discovered that the brain can utilize ketones very efficiently. In some situations, ketones may even provide certain advantages. Many people who practice intermittent fasting report an experience that initially surprises them. Instead of feeling mentally weaker, they often describe feeling more focused, more alert, more mentally clear, less distracted. Of course, individual experiences vary. Not everyone responds in exactly the same way, and adaptation often takes time. But the consistency of these reports has attracted significant scientific interest. Why might ketones support mental clarity? One possible explanation involves energy stability. After a meal rich in refined carbohydrates, blood sugar can rise rapidly. Insulin responds. Blood sugar eventually falls. For some people, these fluctuations are accompanied by shifts in energy and concentration. Ketones, by contrast, may provide a more stable source of fuel. Instead of dramatic peaks and valleys, the brain receives a steadier energy supply. Imagine driving on a smooth highway instead of a road filled with constant bumps and potholes. The journey becomes more efficient, more predictable, more comfortable. Scientists continue investigating exactly how ketones influence brain function. But one thing appears increasingly clear. The fasting brain is not necessarily a struggling brain. In many cases, it may be a highly adaptive brain. Yet ketones are only part of the story. To understand why fasting has become so interesting to neuroscientists, we must introduce another remarkable player, a molecule known as BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. The name is complicated. The concept is not. Many researchers describe BDNF as fertilizer for the brain. Imagine a garden. Plants require sunlight, water, nutrients. Without those resources, growth becomes difficult. The brain operates in a somewhat similar way. Neurons need support, they need protection. They need conditions that encourage growth and adaptation. BDNF helps provide those conditions. It supports the survival of neurons, encourages the formation of new connections, promotes learning, supports memory, and helps the brain remain flexible throughout life. This flexibility is known as neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to adapt, to learn, to reorganize itself, to become stronger through experience. Researchers studying fasting have found evidence suggesting that fasting may influence pathways associated with BDNF production. Animal studies have been particularly intriguing. While scientists continue investigating exactly how these mechanisms operate in humans, the findings have helped generate enormous interest in the relationship between fasting and brain health. From an evolutionary perspective, this connection makes sense. Imagine again the hungry hunter. Food is scarce. Survival depends on problem solving, memory, attention, learning. Under those circumstances, a brain capable of adapting quickly would provide a major advantage. Natural selection may therefore have favored biological systems that enhance cognitive resilience during periods of scarcity. This brings us to memory and concentration, two of the most valued aspects of human cognition. Think about how much of your life depends on them. Remembering names, solving problems, planning for the future, learning new skills, making decisions, maintaining focus in a world filled with distractions. Modern life constantly competes for attention. Notifications, advertisements, emails, messages, social media. The average brain processes enormous amounts of information every day. Many people describe feeling mentally exhausted before noon, unable to concentrate, unable to focus deeply, unable to think clearly. While fasting is not a magical solution to these challenges, many practitioners report improvements in mental sharpness. Some describe fewer energy crashes. Others report longer periods of sustained concentration. Researchers continue exploring the biological reasons behind these experiences. Ketones, BDNF, improved metabolic flexibility, reduced inflammation, stable energy availability, all may contribute to the overall picture. But perhaps the most exciting area of research involves something even larger, the possibility that fasting could influence long-term brain health. As human beings live longer, neurodegenerative diseases have become increasingly common. These conditions such as Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease affect millions of families around the world. Scientists are working tirelessly to understand why these diseases develop and how they might be prevented. No simple solution exists. These conditions are extraordinarily complex, yet researchers have become increasingly interested in fasting-related pathways. Several mechanisms associated with fasting overlap with processes believed to influence brain aging. Autophagy, inflammation reduction, improved insulin sensitivity, enhanced stress resistance, mitochondrial health. All of these areas are currently being explored. Importantly, fasting has not been proven to prevent neurodegenerative disease. The science remains ongoing. Many questions remain unanswered. But the growing body of research has encouraged scientists to investigate whether lifestyle interventions might play a meaningful role in supporting brain health across the lifespan. One particularly fascinating observation involves insulin itself. Most people associate insulin with blood sugar regulation, yet insulin also affects the brain. Some researchers have even described Alzheimer's disease as having metabolic components that deserve closer examination. This does not mean Alzheimer's is simply diabetes of the brain. The reality is far more complex, but it highlights how deeply interconnected metabolism and cognition may be. The brain is not isolated from the rest of the body. What affects metabolic health often affects neurological health as well. This realization has transformed how many scientists think about aging. For decades, researchers often studied organs separately: the heart, the liver, the pancreas, the brain. Today, a more integrated picture is emerging. The body functions as a network. Every system influences every other system, and fasting appears to interact with many of these systems simultaneously. Interestingly, the relationship between fasting and mental performance is not merely a modern scientific topic. History offers numerous examples of thinkers who voluntarily restricted food intake. Ancient philosophers often viewed moderation as a pathway to clarity. Many spiritual traditions incorporated fasting practices long before modern biology existed. Religious fasting appears in cultures across the world, not because people understood ketones or BDNF, but because they observed effects on awareness, discipline, reflection, and mental focus. Several famous intellectuals throughout history also experimented with periods of reduced eating. Some believed it improved concentration. Others reported heightened creativity. Still others described a sense of mental lightness. Of course, historical anecdotes do not prove scientific mechanisms. Personal experiences vary greatly, but they remind us that the relationship between food and cognition has fascinated humanity for thousands of years. Long before neuroscience laboratories, long before brain imaging machines, long before researchers could measure hormones and metabolic markers, people noticed that the mind sometimes behaved differently in the absence of food. Today, science is beginning to explore why. Perhaps the most important lesson is that hunger is not always the enemy we assume it to be. Modern society often treats hunger as an emergency, something that must be eliminated immediately. Yet, throughout most of human history, hunger was a normal part of life. The brain evolved in that environment, adapted to it, learned from it, and perhaps even developed strengths because of it. This does not mean chronic starvation is beneficial. Far from it. Severe malnutrition damages the brain and body. The distinction is critical. Intermittent fasting involves controlled, temporary periods without food, not prolonged deprivation, not starvation. The goal is to activate ancient biological adaptations while maintaining overall health and nutrition. And as scientists continue studying these adaptations, a fascinating picture continues emerging. The hungry brain may be far more capable than we once imagined. Sharper, more resilient, more adaptable, more connected to the rhythms of human evolution. Yet another mystery remains. If the brain responds so strongly to when we eat, if cognition changes depending on feeding and fasting cycles, then perhaps timing itself matters more than we realize. Because hidden behind hunger, hormones, and metabolism is another powerful force. A force that influences nearly every aspect of human biology. An internal clock that has been quietly governing our bodies since the beginning of life itself. And if the brain changes according to meal timing, perhaps the biological clock plays a far greater role than we ever imagined. Part 8. The secret of the biological clock. Imagine that every organ in your body owns a watch. Not a watch on a wrist, not a clock hanging on a wall, but an invisible clock built into every cell. A clock that tells your liver when to process nutrients. A clock that tells your pancreas when to release hormones. A clock that tells your brain when to feel alert. A clock that tells your body when it is time to sleep. For most of human history, nobody knew these clocks existed. People simply noticed patterns. They felt sleepy at night, hungry during certain hours, energetic in the morning, tired after sunset. The rhythm seemed natural, almost magical. Today, science has revealed something extraordinary. These rhythms are not accidents. They are part of one of the most important systems in human biology, a system known as the circadian rhythm, or more simply, the biological clock. And as researchers have begun studying intermittent fasting, they have discovered something surprising. The timing of eating may be almost as important as the food itself. To understand why, we must first appreciate how deeply time influences the human body. Imagine a symphony orchestra. Every musician has a role. The violin, the piano, the trumpet, the drums. When each instrument plays at the proper moment, beautiful music emerges. But if every musician ignores timing, chaos follows. The human body operates in a remarkably similar way. Hormones rise and fall according to predictable schedules. Body temperature fluctuates throughout the day. Blood pressure changes. Metabolism changes. Alertness changes. Even the activity of genes changes depending on the time of day. Scientists estimate that thousands of genes behave differently during different parts of the 24-hour cycle. This means that your body is not the same at 8 in the morning as it is at 8 in the evening. The same meal, the same calories, the same nutrients can produce different biological responses depending on when they are consumed. This realization has transformed how researchers think about nutrition. For decades, the primary focus was on what people ate: protein, fat, carbohydrates, calories, vitamins, minerals, all important. But another question emerged. When are people eating? And that question leads us to one of the most influential researchers in modern circadian biology, Dr. Satchin Panda. Working at the Salk Institute, Panda became fascinated by the relationship between biological timing and health. His research explored a deceptively simple idea. What if many health problems are not caused only by what people eat, but also by eating at the wrong times? To investigate this question, Panda and his colleagues conducted numerous studies examining time-restricted eating. Their findings challenged conventional assumptions. In both animal studies and human research, extending eating across very long periods of the day appeared to create metabolic problems. Meanwhile, limiting food intake to a more consistent daily window often produced benefits. The implications were profound. Many modern humans spend nearly the entire day eating. A coffee with sugar in the early morning, breakfast, mid-morning snacks, lunch, afternoon snacks, dinner, dessert, late-night treats. The eating window can easily stretch across 15 or 16 hours, sometimes longer. From the body's perspective, this means digestion and nutrient processing continue almost constantly. The biological orchestra never gets a break. The musicians never leave the stage. The performance never pauses. And over time, this constant activity may contribute to metabolic dysfunction. One of Panda's most important insights was that the body seems to prefer distinct periods of feeding and fasting, periods of activity, periods of recovery, periods of energy intake, periods of maintenance. This pattern aligns remarkably well with the evolutionary story we explored earlier. For millions of years, humans did not eat around the clock. Food availability naturally created eating windows and fasting windows. The body evolved within those rhythms. But perhaps the most fascinating findings emerged when researchers began studying nighttime eating. Modern society has created a strange situation. For the first time in human history, many people consume significant amounts of food late into the night. Bright artificial lighting keeps us awake. Entertainment never stops. Restaurants remain open. Food delivery services operate 24 hours a day. The biological clock, however, still follows ancient rules, and those rules were written long before electric light existed. Imagine trying to perform daytime activities at midnight. The body can do it, but it may not do it efficiently. Many biological processes are optimized for daylight hours: digestion, insulin sensitivity, nutrient handling, metabolic activity. Researchers have repeatedly observed that these systems often function better earlier in the day than late at night. This may help explain why nighttime eating has become a concern among circadian scientists. When large meals are consumed late in the evening, the body may struggle to process nutrients as effectively. Blood sugar responses can become less favorable. Insulin sensitivity may be reduced. Metabolic efficiency may decline. Imagine asking a factory to perform its busiest workload during the night shift when most workers are preparing to go home. The job can still be completed, but performance may suffer. This does not mean eating after sunset is automatically dangerous. Human biology is more flexible than that. Occasional late dinners are not a health catastrophe. The concern arises when nighttime eating becomes a chronic pattern repeated day after day for years. The cumulative effects may matter. This brings us to another fascinating question. Why do some researchers believe earlier eating windows may offer advantages? At first glance, it seems like a minor detail. After all, if someone fasts for 16 hours, does it really matter whether the eating window begins at noon or earlier in the day? Increasingly, evidence suggests that it might. Many researchers have found that insulin sensitivity tends to be higher earlier in the day. The body often handles glucose more effectively during morning and afternoon hours. Hormonal patterns may also align better with daytime eating. As a result, some studies have suggested benefits associated with earlier time-restricted eating schedules. For example, An eating window that begins in the morning and ends in the late afternoon may produce different metabolic effects compared with one that begins at noon and extends late into the evening. The differences are not always dramatic, and practicality matters. Many people choose eating schedules that fit their work and family responsibilities. Consistency is usually more important than perfection. Yet the research continues, pointing toward an intriguing conclusion. The body appears to prefer eating during daylight hours. After all, that is how humans evolved. For countless generations, darkness signaled rest rather than feeding. And this naturally leads us to one of the most important pillars of health: sleep. It is impossible to discuss circadian rhythms without discussing sleep. Sleep is not merely a period of inactivity. It is one of the most biologically active processes in the body. While you sleep, memories are consolidated, hormones are regulated, immune function is supported, cellular repair occurs, the brain undergoes maintenance. The body performs countless tasks that are difficult or impossible during waking hours. Unfortunately, poor sleep has become increasingly common in modern society. Many people sleep less than previous generations. Artificial light delays melatonin production. Stress interferes with recovery. Digital devices keep minds active long after sunset. The consequences extend far beyond fatigue. Sleep deprivation can influence hunger hormones, increase cravings, reduce insulin sensitivity, elevate stress hormones, and make healthy eating dramatically more difficult. This is one reason intermittent fasting and circadian health often complement one another. When eating windows align with natural biological rhythms, sleep quality may improve. And when sleep improves, metabolic health often improves as well. The relationship works in both directions. Healthy sleep supports healthy metabolism. Healthy metabolism supports healthy sleep. Together, they create a positive cycle. And perhaps nowhere is this more important than in the study of aging. For decades, scientists searching for the secrets of longevity have examined populations known for exceptional lifespan. Again and again, similar patterns emerge: physical activity, strong social connections, nutritious diets, stress management, adequate sleep. And increasingly, researchers are paying attention to daily timing patterns. The body appears to thrive when its biological clocks remain synchronized. When sleep occurs at appropriate times, when activity aligns with daylight, when eating follows predictable rhythms, when internal systems operate in harmony. Circadian disruption, by contrast, has been associated with numerous health challenges: metabolic disease, cardiovascular disease, obesity, and other age-related conditions. While many factors influence lifespan, researchers increasingly believe that maintaining healthy circadian rhythms may play an important role in healthy aging. Perhaps this should not surprise us. After all, life on Earth evolved under predictable cycles of light and darkness: the rising sun, the setting sun, day after day, year after year. For billions of years, every organism developed within those rhythms. Humans are no exception. Our bodies still remember those ancient cycles, even if modern life sometimes encourages us to ignore them. As we reach this point in our journey, a practical question naturally emerges. We have explored evolution, metabolism, autophagy, fat burning, blood sugar, heart health, brain function, and biological timing. But knowledge alone is not enough. Eventually, every curious listener asks the same question: if I want to try intermittent fasting myself, where should I begin? Should I choose a 12-hour schedule? A 14-hour schedule? A 16-hour schedule? A 5-to-2 approach? Or something entirely different? Because understanding the science is only the first step. The next challenge is finding the method that fits your life. And that is exactly where our journey goes next. Part 9. 16-to-8, 14-to-10, or 5-to-2. Finding the formula that fits your life. Imagine that you have just discovered intermittent fasting. You are excited, motivated, curious. For the first time, nutrition seems simpler than another complicated diet. There are no endless calorie calculations, no forbidden foods, no expensive supplements, no elaborate meal plans. Then you open the internet. Suddenly, you see dozens of different fasting methods: 12-to-12, 14-to-10, 16-to-8, 18-to-6, 5-to-2. OMAD, alternate day fasting, extended fasting, and immediately confusion appears. Which one is best? Which one burns the most fat? Which one activates autophagy fastest? Which one helps you live longer? The answer may surprise you. The best fasting protocol is often not the most extreme one. The best protocol is usually the one you can maintain consistently, because in health, consistency almost always defeats intensity. A strategy followed for years will outperform a perfect strategy abandoned after 2 weeks. So before choosing a fasting method, we need to understand a simple truth. Intermittent fasting is not a competition. It is not about suffering. It is not about proving discipline. It is about creating a sustainable rhythm between eating and fasting, a rhythm that works with your biology rather than against it. Let us begin with the most gentle approach, the 12 to 12 method. At first glance, 12 to 12 barely seems like fasting at all. You stop eating at 8 in the evening. You eat breakfast at 8 in the morning. 12 hours without food. 12 hours with food. Simple. Many people are surprised to learn that this pattern resembles how humans traditionally ate before constant snacking became normal. For someone currently eating from early morning until late at night, moving to a 12-hour eating window can already be a meaningful improvement. Late-night snacks disappear. The digestive system receives a longer period of rest. Blood sugar fluctuations may become less frequent. The biological clock often benefits from a more structured routine. For beginners, 12 to 12 can be an excellent starting point. It allows the body to adapt gradually. No shock. No extreme hunger. No dramatic lifestyle changes. Just a small shift toward metabolic balance. Think of it as learning to walk before learning to run. Once that feels comfortable, many people naturally progress to the 14 to 10 method. This approach extends the fasting period to 14 hours while allowing a 10-hour eating window. For example, someone might finish dinner at 7 in the evening and eat breakfast at 9 the following morning. The difference may seem small, only 2 additional fasting hours, yet biologically, those hours can be meaningful. Insulin remains lower for longer. The body spends more time accessing stored energy. Metabolic flexibility continues improving. Many researchers consider 14 hours a practical middle ground, long enough to encourage beneficial metabolic adaptations, short enough to remain manageable for most lifestyles. For many people, 14 to 10 becomes a long-term solution rather than merely a stepping stone. It fits family schedules, work schedules, social obligations, and perhaps most importantly, it feels sustainable. Then we arrive at the most famous fasting protocol in the world, 16 to 8. The method that transformed intermittent fasting into a global phenomenon. Under this approach, fasting lasts 16 hours and eating occurs within an 8-hour window, perhaps from noon until 8 in the evening, or from 10 in the morning until 6 in the evening. The exact schedule varies. The principle remains the same: 16 hours without calories, 8 hours for meals. Why has 16 to 8 become so popular? Partly because it strikes an appealing balance. The fasting period is substantial enough to promote fat utilization and ketone production. Yet the eating window remains large enough for most people to consume adequate nutrition comfortably. For many individuals, 16 to 8 feels challenging during the first week, then surprisingly normal after several weeks. The morning hunger gradually fades, the body adapts, meal timing becomes routine, energy levels stabilize. This is one reason many researchers and health professionals view 16 to 8 as a practical long-term strategy. It is demanding enough to create metabolic change, but not so demanding that it becomes impossible to maintain. However, some individuals eventually become curious about more advanced approaches. This leads us to 18 to 6. At first glance, the difference appears minor, only 2 additional fasting hours. But anyone who has tried both methods knows those hours can feel significant. Under 18 to 6, the eating window becomes relatively narrow, typically 6 hours, perhaps from noon until 6 in the evening, or from 1 until 7. This approach extends the time spent in a fasting state. Ketone production may increase, fat utilization may increase, autophagy-related processes may become more active, at least theoretically, yet there is a trade-off. As fasting duration increases, sustainability often decreases. Social events become more difficult. Meeting nutritional needs becomes more challenging. Some individuals thrive with 18 to 6. Others find it unnecessarily restrictive. This highlights an important lesson. More is not always better. A fasting protocol only works if it can become part of your life. The next approach takes an entirely different path. The 5 to 2 method. Unlike time-restricted eating, 5 to 2 focuses on weekly rather than daily patterns. 5 days per week involve normal eating. 2 non-consecutive days involve significant calorie reduction, typically around 500 to 600 calories. Some people love this approach, others dislike it immediately. Its advantage is flexibility. Most days remain unchanged. No daily eating window is required. The challenge is that the reduced calorie days can feel difficult. Hunger may become more noticeable. Energy levels may fluctuate. Some people prefer predictable daily routines rather than alternating schedules. Interestingly, research suggests that several fasting approaches can produce similar benefits when practiced consistently. This means the perfect method matters less than adherence. A good plan followed consistently beats a perfect plan abandoned quickly. Then we arrive at one of the most controversial fasting strategies, OMAD, 1 meal a day. The name sounds dramatic because it is. Instead of eating across several hours, all daily calories are consumed during a single meal. Supporters often describe simplicity, convenience, strong appetite control, deep fasting periods. Critics point to potential challenges, meeting nutritional requirements, maintaining muscle mass, managing energy levels, supporting athletic performance. The reality is nuanced. Some people genuinely thrive with OMAD, others struggle significantly. The human body is adaptable, but individual needs vary tremendously. For most beginners, OMAD is rarely the ideal starting point. It represents an advanced strategy rather than an introductory one. Remember our central principle. The goal is not to find the hardest protocol. The goal is to find the most sustainable one. Now another question emerges. Should everyone choose the same fasting schedule? The answer is almost certainly no. Age matters, lifestyle matters, health status matters, goals matter. What works beautifully for one person may be inappropriate for another. Consider younger adults. Young people often possess greater metabolic flexibility. Recovery tends to be faster. Hormonal systems are generally more resilient. Many younger adults tolerate fasting quite well. However, younger individuals engaged in intense athletic training may require additional attention to nutrient timing and recovery. The objective should not be maximizing fasting hours. The objective should be balancing performance, recovery, and long-term health. Next, consider middle-aged adults. This group often represents the largest population exploring intermittent fasting. Metabolic changes may be emerging. Insulin sensitivity may be declining. Body fat accumulation may become easier. Recovery may require more attention. For many individuals in this stage of life, fasting protocols such as 14 to 10 or 16 to 8 often provide an attractive balance between effectiveness and practicality. The routines fit professional responsibilities, family obligations, and social life. At the same time, they may support improvements in metabolic health. Then we arrive at older adults. This group requires special consideration. As people age, preserving muscle mass becomes increasingly important. Protein intake becomes more important. Recovery becomes more important. Nutritional adequacy becomes more important. An overly aggressive fasting strategy may not always be appropriate. For many older adults, moderate approaches often make more sense than extreme ones. The goal shifts from maximizing fasting duration to maximizing health span, maintaining strength, maintaining independence, maintaining quality of life. This illustrates one of the most important truths in nutrition. Context matters. Human beings are not identical. There is no universal protocol, no perfect formula, no single schedule that works for everyone. The body is not a machine assembled from interchangeable parts. It is a living system shaped by age, genetics, environment, activity levels, sleep patterns, stress levels, and countless other variables. The best fasting protocol is therefore highly personal. Some people discover that 12 to 12 changes their lives. Others feel best with 14 to 10. Many settle comfortably into 16 to 8. A smaller group prefers 18 to 6. Some enjoy 5 to 2. A few thrive with OMAD. The diversity of successful approaches reminds us of something important. Intermittent fasting is not about following a trend. It is about discovering a rhythm that works for your biology, a rhythm that you can sustain for years, not days, not weeks, years. Because lasting health rarely comes from short bursts of perfection. It emerges from consistent habits repeated over long periods of time. Yet, even after choosing the right fasting schedule, many people still fail. Not because they selected the wrong protocol, not because fasting itself does not work, but because they make a series of mistakes that quietly undermine their progress. And those mistakes are far more common than most people realize. In the next chapter, we will explore the 10 most common reasons intermittent fasting fails. Because choosing the right method is only the beginning. The real challenge is avoiding the traps that cause so many people to give up before they ever experience the full benefits. Part 10. The 10 mistakes that make intermittent fasting fail. Imagine two people starting intermittent fasting on the same day. They read the same articles, follow the same schedule, choose the same 16 to 8 eating window. Both are motivated. Both believe they're doing everything correctly. Yet 6 months later, their results look completely different. One person has more stable energy, better metabolic health, improved body composition, greater consistency. The other feels frustrated, hungry, disappointed, convinced that intermittent fasting simply does not work. What happened? The answer often has very little to do with fasting itself, because intermittent fasting is not magic. It is a tool. And like any tool, its effectiveness depends on how it is used. Over the years, researchers, physicians, and nutrition experts have noticed a pattern. Most failures do not happen because people choose the wrong fasting window. They happen because of a series of hidden mistakes that quietly sabotage progress. Today, we will explore the 10 most common mistakes, and perhaps more importantly, why they happen. Mistake number 1, eating too much during the eating window. This is by far the most common misunderstanding. Many people hear the phrase, "eat whatever you want during your eating window." The statement sounds liberating. Unfortunately, it is often interpreted incorrectly. Imagine spending 16 hours fasting and then rewarding yourself with an enormous feast. A large pizza, sugary drinks, dessert, additional snacks, thousands of calories consumed within a few hours. Technically, you are still following the fasting schedule, but biologically, the situation becomes more complicated. Intermittent fasting does not erase the laws of energy balance. The body still responds to excessive calorie intake. It still stores surplus energy. It still processes nutrients according to basic physiological principles. Fasting can help regulate appetite for many people, but it does not create immunity from overeating. The goal is not to starve and then binge. The goal is to establish a sustainable eating rhythm, one that supports health rather than extremes. Mistake number 2, relying on ultra-processed foods. This mistake often follows the first one. People focus so intensely on when they eat that they completely ignore what they eat. Imagine two individuals following identical fasting schedules. One fills their eating window with vegetables, lean proteins, whole grains, fruit, nuts, healthy fats. The other consumes mostly chips, candy, sugary beverages, fast food, packaged snacks. Both are technically practicing intermittent fasting, yet their bodies are receiving very different nutritional signals. The quality of food still matters. Vitamins matter, minerals matter, protein matters, fiber matters. The body requires building materials. Fasting can influence metabolism, but it cannot transform poor nutrition into optimal health. Think of fasting as creating an opportunity. Food quality determines how that opportunity is used. Mistake number 3, drinking calories during the fasting period. This mistake sounds obvious, yet it happens constantly. Many people believe they are fasting while consuming beverages that contain significant calories. Sugary coffee drinks, sweetened tea, fruit juice, energy drinks, cream-loaded specialty coffees. The problem is not necessarily the calories themselves. The problem is that these beverages interrupt the fasting state. They trigger metabolic responses, influence insulin, and may reduce many of the physiological changes people are trying to achieve. Water, black coffee, unsweetened tea. These are generally considered compatible with most fasting approaches. But once substantial calories enter the picture, the biological situation changes. Many beginners unknowingly break their fast several times every morning, without realizing it. Mistake number 4, not drinking enough water. As eating frequency decreases, some people unintentionally reduce fluid intake as well. Food contributes water. Meals often trigger drinking habits. When meals disappear, hydration sometimes declines. The consequences can be surprisingly noticeable. Headaches, fatigue, dizziness, poor concentration, irritability. symptoms that many people mistakenly blame on fasting itself. In reality, dehydration may be the primary culprit. The human body depends on water for virtually every biological process: blood circulation, temperature regulation, nutrient transport, cellular function. Hydration remains essential whether someone is fasting or not, perhaps even more important during the adaptation phase. Mistake number 5, ignoring electrolytes. This mistake often receives less attention, yet it can dramatically affect how people feel. Electrolytes include minerals such as sodium, potassium, and magnesium. These substances help regulate nerve function, muscle contraction, fluid balance, and countless other physiological processes. When eating patterns change, electrolyte intake may also change. Some individuals experience fatigue, muscle cramps, weakness, lightheadedness, or headaches. In some cases, inadequate electrolyte intake contributes to these symptoms. This does not mean everyone needs expensive supplements. Often, a balanced diet provides what the body needs. But awareness matters. Hydration alone is not always the complete answer. The body requires both fluids and minerals. Mistake number 6, poor sleep. If there is one health habit that rivals nutrition in importance, it may be sleep. Unfortunately, many people underestimate its influence. Imagine sleeping only 5 hours per night, then attempting to improve your metabolism through fasting. The challenge becomes much greater. Sleep deprivation affects hunger hormones. It influences insulin sensitivity. It impacts decision-making. Cravings often increase. Appetite regulation becomes more difficult. Willpower declines. The body perceives stress, and the entire metabolic environment shifts in an unfavorable direction. Many people blame fasting when their results stall. In reality, the problem may begin in the bedroom rather than the kitchen. Sleep and fasting are partners. When one improves, the other often becomes easier. Mistake number 7, living under chronic stress. The modern world produces a remarkable amount of stress: financial concerns, work pressures, family responsibilities, constant digital stimulation, uncertainty about the future. The body responds to these challenges through powerful hormonal systems. One of the most important involves cortisol, often called the stress hormone. Cortisol is not inherently bad. In fact, it is essential for survival, but chronic elevation can create problems. Sleep quality may decline, cravings may increase, metabolic health may suffer, inflammation may rise. Many people attempt to use fasting as a solution while ignoring overwhelming levels of stress. Unfortunately, biology does not separate these variables. The body experiences them together. Health emerges from the interaction of multiple systems, not from a single intervention. Mistake number 8, training at the wrong intensity or time. Exercise and fasting can work beautifully together, but they must be balanced appropriately. Some individuals begin fasting and immediately attempt extremely demanding workouts, long endurance sessions, high-intensity intervals, heavy strength training, all while dramatically reducing food intake. Sometimes the body adapts well, sometimes it does not. Energy levels decline, recovery suffers, motivation disappears. The issue is not exercise itself. The issue is failing to match training demands with nutritional support. A beginner fasting for the first time may benefit from allowing the body to adapt before pursuing aggressive fitness goals. Context matters. Timing matters. Recovery matters. The body appreciates gradual adaptation. Mistake number 9, becoming too extreme. This mistake is particularly common in the age of social media. Someone begins with a sensible 12-12 schedule, then quickly jumps to 16-8, then 18-6, then one meal a day, then multi-day fasts. The mindset becomes more is better, longer is better, harder is better. But biology rarely rewards extremes. The objective of intermittent fasting is not suffering. The objective is health. A sustainable 14-hour fast practiced for years is often more beneficial than an extreme protocol abandoned after a few weeks. The healthiest strategy is not necessarily the most impressive one. The healthiest strategy is the one that fits naturally into daily life. Remember what we learned earlier. Consistency beats intensity, almost every time. Mistake number 10, giving up too soon. Perhaps this is the most important mistake of all. Modern culture encourages immediate results, immediate weight loss, immediate energy, immediate transformation. But biology operates on a different timeline. The body requires time to adapt. Hunger hormones need time to adjust. Metabolic flexibility develops gradually. New habits take time to become automatic. Many people quit during the adaptation phase. They assume temporary discomfort means failure. In reality, the body may simply be learning. Think about learning a new language. The first weeks feel awkward. Progress seems slow. Mistakes happen constantly. But eventually, understanding emerges. Fasting often follows a similar pattern. The initial challenge is not always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes it is evidence that adaptation is occurring. Patience becomes part of the process. And this brings us to an important realization. Most fasting failures are not actually failures of fasting. They are failures of implementation. Too much food, poor food quality, hidden calories, dehydration, electrolyte imbalance, poor sleep, chronic stress, improper training, excessive restriction, unrealistic expectations. Address these issues, and intermittent fasting often becomes dramatically easier. Ignore them, and even the best fasting protocol may produce disappointing results. Yet there is another truth we must acknowledge. Intermittent fasting is not appropriate for everyone. The internet often presents fasting as a universal solution, a tool for every person, every age, every situation. But science tells a more nuanced story. Some individuals should approach fasting cautiously. Others should avoid it altogether. And this is something many influencers conveniently forget to mention, because the question is not simply whether fasting can be beneficial. The question is, who should use it and who should not? That is where our journey goes next. Part 11. Who should not practice intermittent fasting? Every powerful tool comes with a paradox. The same thing that helps one person can harm another. Exercise strengthens the body, but an injured athlete may need rest. Sunlight supports health, but excessive exposure can cause damage. Water sustains life, but even water becomes dangerous in extreme amounts. Intermittent fasting is no different. Throughout this series, we have explored fascinating scientific discoveries. We have examined metabolism, insulin, autophagy, fat burning, brain health, circadian rhythms, and longevity research. By now, intermittent fasting may sound almost magical, but science rarely deals in magic. Science deals in context, and context matters. One of the most important lessons in modern medicine is that there is no universal solution. No single eating pattern works perfectly for every human being. Different bodies have different needs. Different life stages require different approaches. Different medical conditions create different risks. This chapter may be the most important chapter in the entire series. Because before asking whether fasting can help you, we must first ask a more important question. Should you be fasting at all? Let us begin with one of the clearest examples. Pregnant women. Pregnancy is one of the most extraordinary biological processes in nature. Inside a mother's body, an entirely new human being is developing. Cells divide, organs form, bones grow, the brain develops. Every moment requires energy, nutrients, building materials. The mother's body is not only supporting herself, it is supporting another life. This dramatically changes nutritional priorities. During pregnancy, the goal is not metabolic optimization through fasting. The goal is supporting healthy fetal development and maternal health. Energy needs often increase. Nutrient requirements become more important. Protein needs rise. Micronutrients become critically important. For this reason, many health professionals recommend caution regarding fasting during pregnancy. Research in this area remains limited, and because pregnancy involves unique physiological demands, any major dietary changes should be discussed with qualified healthcare providers. The same principle generally applies during breastfeeding. Nutritional demands remain elevated. Energy requirements remain substantial. The body is performing an extraordinary task, and that task deserves careful support. Next, we turn to children and adolescents. This topic is equally important. Think about what happens during childhood. Growth, development, learning, physical maturation, hormonal changes, the construction of an entire adult body. Children are not simply smaller adults. Their biology is fundamentally different. They require consistent nutritional support to sustain growth and development. The brain continues developing. Bones continue growing. Muscles continue forming. The body's priorities differ dramatically from those of a middle-aged adult attempting to improve metabolic health. For this reason, routine intermittent fasting protocols are generally not recommended for growing children unless specifically guided by medical professionals for particular clinical reasons. A developing body requires reliable access to nutrients. Growth is the priority, not fasting. The next group may be less obvious. People with a history of eating disorders. This subject deserves special attention because health is not only physical, it is also psychological. Eating disorders can profoundly affect how individuals think about food, body image, weight, control, and self-worth. For someone recovering from an eating disorder, restrictive eating patterns may sometimes trigger unhealthy behaviors or thought patterns. What appears to be a health intervention for one person may become psychologically harmful for another. This does not mean every individual with a past eating disorder can never fast. Human situations are rarely that simple, but it does mean caution is essential. Professional guidance is often valuable. The goal should always be long-term health, not merely adherence to a particular eating schedule. Mental well-being matters just as much as physical well-being. Now we arrive at another critically important group: people taking diabetes medications. At first glance, this may seem surprising. After all, we have spent several chapters discussing how fasting may improve blood sugar regulation. And indeed, research suggests fasting can influence glucose metabolism. But that influence creates a potential challenge. Many diabetes medications are designed to lower blood sugar. If food intake decreases while medication remains unchanged, blood sugar levels can sometimes drop too far. This condition is known as hypoglycemia. Symptoms may include dizziness, weakness, confusion, sweating, rapid heartbeat, and in severe cases, serious medical emergencies. This does not mean people with diabetes can never practice fasting. In fact, some individuals successfully incorporate fasting under medical supervision. The key phrase is medical supervision. Medication adjustments may be necessary, monitoring may be necessary, professional guidance may be necessary, because safety must always come first. Next, let us discuss individuals who are significantly underweight. Most fasting discussions occur in the context of weight loss, but not everyone needs to lose weight. Some people struggle to maintain weight. Others struggle to consume sufficient calories. Still others have naturally low body fat levels. For these individuals, aggressive fasting may create more problems than benefits. Remember, fasting is not inherently healthy simply because it is fasting. The value depends on context. A person already experiencing inadequate nutrition may not benefit from further reducing eating opportunities. The body requires energy, protein, micronutrients, and sufficient resources to maintain healthy function. If nutritional status is already compromised, fasting may not be the appropriate strategy. This brings us to another group that is often overlooked: people with highly demanding occupations. Imagine a construction worker performing physically demanding labor for 10 hours under intense heat, or a firefighter responding to emergencies, or a commercial fisherman working long shifts at sea, or a professional athlete engaged in multiple daily training sessions. The energy demands in these situations can be enormous. Nutritional timing may play a critical role in performance and recovery. Again, this does not mean fasting is impossible. Some individuals successfully adapt fasting schedules to demanding lifestyles. But the approach must match the reality of the situation. A fasting protocol that works perfectly for an office worker may not work for someone expending thousands of calories through physical labor every day. Biology always operates within context. The body does not care about internet trends. It responds to actual demands, actual energy needs, actual physiological stress. Perhaps the most important lesson emerging from all these examples is that fasting is not a moral achievement. It is not a badge of honor. It is not proof of discipline. It is simply a tool, and tools are useful only when applied appropriately. A hammer is excellent for driving nails, terrible for cutting wood. The value depends on the situation. Intermittent fasting should be viewed through the same lens. Now let us address a practical question. When should someone speak with a doctor before trying intermittent fasting? The safest answer is surprisingly simple: whenever uncertainty exists, particularly if medical conditions are involved. Certain situations deserve special consideration: diabetes, heart disease, kidney disease, liver disease, pregnancy, breastfeeding, history of eating disorders, multiple prescription medications, significant weight loss, chronic fatigue, unexplained symptoms. These situations do not automatically prohibit fasting, but they may justify professional guidance. Healthcare providers can evaluate individual circumstances, assess risks, review medications, and help create a safe plan. Seeking medical advice is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of intelligence. The human body is incredibly complex. There is no shame in asking for expert guidance. In fact, it is often the wisest decision. Another important signal involves listening to your own body. Many people become so focused on following a fasting schedule that they ignore warning signs: persistent dizziness, extreme fatigue, fainting, severe weakness, unusual symptoms. These signals should never be ignored. The goal of fasting is improved health, not suffering, not endurance contests, not proving toughness. If something feels seriously wrong, paying attention is far more important than completing a fasting window. Health should enhance life, not diminish it. And this leads us to a deeper realization. The internet often presents health interventions as all or nothing choices. Either fasting is amazing or fasting is terrible. Either everyone should do it or nobody should. Reality is rarely that simple. The truth is usually found somewhere in the middle. Intermittent fasting may offer meaningful benefits for many people. Research suggests improvements in metabolic health, insulin sensitivity, weight management, cardiovascular risk factors, and potentially other aspects of health. Yet it is not universally appropriate, nor is it universally necessary. Some people will thrive with it, others will not. And that is perfectly normal. Because health is not about finding a single perfect strategy, it is about finding the right strategy for you. As our journey approaches its conclusion, a final question remains. After all the research, all the biological mechanisms, all the promises and limitations, what is the true value of intermittent fasting? If it is not a miracle, if it is not magic, if it is not a universal solution, then what exactly makes it so powerful? The answer may be far simpler than most people expect, and it takes us directly to the deepest lesson of this entire series. Because perhaps the real secret was never about eating less. It was about learning to eat more intelligently. Part 12. The real secret of longevity: not eating less, but eating smarter. We began this journey with a simple question: what if human beings were never designed to eat all day? At first, the idea sounded almost too simple. How could something as ordinary as not eating for a few hours influence metabolism, fat loss, blood sugar, heart health, brain function, and perhaps even aging itself? Yet chapter after chapter, the evidence led us deeper into a fascinating story, a story that began millions of years ago, long before supermarkets, long before refrigerators, long before food was available every hour of every day. The story of intermittent fasting is not really a story about a diet. It is a story about human biology. It is a story about how our bodies evolved. And perhaps most importantly, it is a story about rediscovering rhythms that modern life has almost completely erased. Think back to the beginning. Our ancestors lived in a world of uncertainty. Some days brought abundance. Other days brought scarcity. Food was never guaranteed. The human body evolved under those conditions. It learned how to store energy, how to use energy, how to survive periods without food, how to shift between feeding and fasting. For hundreds of thousands of years, this pattern was normal. Then everything changed. Agriculture arrived. Industrial food production arrived. Artificial lighting arrived. 24-hour convenience arrived. For the first time in human history, millions of people gained access to nearly constant food availability. And with that change came an unexpected question. What happens when the body never experiences the fasting periods it evolved to expect? That question ultimately led scientists towards some remarkable discoveries. We learned about insulin, the hormone that helps regulate blood sugar and directs energy throughout the body. We learned how the body gradually transitions from burning recently consumed food to using stored energy. We learned about glycogen, ketones, fat metabolism, and the extraordinary concept known as metabolic flexibility, the ability to switch efficiently between different fuel sources. This ability appears to be one of the hallmarks of metabolic health. Not because the body prefers fasting all the time, but because it benefits from having options. A healthy body can thrive during feeding and function effectively during fasting, like a hybrid vehicle capable of running on multiple energy systems. Then came one of the most fascinating scientific discoveries of all: autophagy, the process that earned Yoshinori Ohsumi the Nobel Prize, a word that literally means self-eating, a strange name for a beautiful process. Inside every cell, damaged proteins accumulate, worn-out structures accumulate, cellular debris accumulates. The body must constantly repair and recycle itself. Autophagy represents one of the ways it accomplishes that task. Scientists continue exploring this remarkable process. Many questions remain unanswered. Yet its discovery fundamentally changed how researchers think about fasting. No longer was fasting viewed simply as the absence of food. It became a biological state capable of activating ancient cellular programs that may help maintain health and resilience. From there, we explored weight loss, perhaps the most visible reason many people become interested in fasting. And we discovered something important. Fat loss is not magic, it is physiology. Insulin levels matter, energy balance matters, food quality matters, consistency matters. Intermittent fasting can support fat loss, but it is not a shortcut around biology. Instead, it often works because it helps restore a more natural relationship with hunger, energy, and eating. Then we entered the world of blood sugar. Prediabetes, insulin resistance, the silent metabolic epidemic affecting millions of people around the world. We learned that stable blood sugar is about far more than diabetes prevention. It influences energy, mood, mental clarity, cardiovascular health, and long-term well-being. The body performs best when energy regulation functions smoothly, not when it is trapped on a constant roller coaster of spikes and crashes. The heart came next, and perhaps we gained a deeper appreciation for just how interconnected the body truly is. Blood sugar affects inflammation. Inflammation affects blood vessels. Blood vessels affect the heart. The heart affects every organ. Nothing exists in isolation. Health is a network, a symphony, a delicate balance among countless biological systems. Then we explored what may be the most fascinating organ of all, the brain. For generations, many people assumed hunger automatically made us mentally weaker. Yet evolutionary logic suggested something different. A hungry hunter needed sharper focus, not less focus. And modern research has revealed intriguing connections between fasting, ketones, BDNF, neuroplasticity, and cognitive function. The fasting brain may be far more adaptable than previous generations imagined. Next came the biological clock, the circadian rhythm, one of the most important discoveries in modern physiology. The realization that timing matters, not only what we eat, but when we eat. The body follows rhythms, hormones follow rhythms, metabolism follows rhythms. And increasingly, researchers believe that aligning eating patterns with those rhythms may influence long-term health. After understanding the science, we explored practical application, different fasting schedules, different lifestyles, different needs, because there is no universal formula. The best fasting plan is not necessarily the most aggressive one. It is the one you can sustain, the one that supports your life rather than disrupting it. Then we examined the mistakes, the hidden traps, the reasons many people fail. And finally, we confronted an essential truth. Intermittent fasting is not for everyone. Health always requires context. The right tool for one person may be inappropriate for another. This lesson may be one of the most important takeaways from the entire series. Now let us ask a different question. What has science actually proven? This distinction matters because health discussions often become exaggerated. The evidence supporting intermittent fasting is impressive. Research suggests potential benefits for insulin sensitivity, blood sugar control, weight management, certain cardiovascular risk factors, metabolic flexibility, and various cellular pathways associated with health. These findings are meaningful, but science also teaches humility. Many questions remain unanswered. Researchers continue investigating long-term outcomes, optimal fasting schedules, individual differences, the relationship between fasting and longevity, the precise role of autophagy in humans, the interaction between genetics and fasting responses. The truth is that science remains a work in progress, and that is exactly how science should work, not through certainty, but through continuous discovery. This brings us to a critical realization. Intermittent fasting is not a diet. Diets often focus on restriction, rules, temporary behavior, a beginning and an ending. Intermittent fasting is different. At its core, it is a timing strategy, a framework, a way of organizing eating patterns. You can practice intermittent fasting while eating healthy foods or unhealthy foods. You can gain weight while fasting. You can lose weight while fasting. The fasting schedule itself is only one piece of a much larger picture. Perhaps this is why some of the world's longest living populations offer such valuable lessons. In regions often referred to as blue zones, researchers have identified communities where people regularly live exceptionally long lives. Although these cultures differ dramatically, certain themes appear repeatedly. Whole foods, moderate portions, strong social connections, physical activity, purpose, community, lower levels of chronic stress. Interestingly, many of these populations naturally avoid constant eating. Meals follow rhythms. Eating often ends early in the evening. Periods without food occur naturally. Not because people are chasing a trend, but because their lifestyles evolved around sustainable habits. This observation reveals something profound. Longevity rarely comes from a single secret. It emerges from patterns. Daily behaviors repeated over decades. The future of longevity science will likely continue exploring these patterns. Researchers are investigating cellular repair, senescence, mitochondrial health, autophagy, circadian biology, artificial intelligence in medicine, personalized nutrition, genetics, and countless other fields. The coming decades may transform our understanding of aging, but one lesson already appears clear. The body possesses extraordinary capacities for adaptation and self-maintenance. Sometimes our role is not to force health. Sometimes our role is simply to stop interfering with processes that evolution has already refined. For those interested in trying intermittent fasting, a simple 30-day approach may be the best place to start. During week 1, establish a consistent 12-hour eating window. For example, finish dinner by 8 in the evening and eat breakfast after 8 in the morning. Focus on hydration, sleep, and meal quality. During week 2, extend the fasting period slightly, perhaps 13 or 14 hours, nothing extreme. Allow the body time to adapt. During week 3, experiment with a 14 to 10 or 16 to 8 schedule if it feels comfortable. Pay attention to energy levels, hunger, sleep quality, and overall well-being. During week 4, continue refining the routine. Not chasing perfection, not chasing suffering, simply observing how your body responds. Remember, the goal is sustainability, not endurance, not punishment, not proving discipline. And now we arrive at the final message, perhaps the most important message of this entire series. The human body is more intelligent than we often realize. Inside you exists a vast network of repair systems, recovery systems, adaptation systems, protective systems. For millions of years, these systems helped humans survive changing environments. Periods of abundance, periods of scarcity, periods of challenge. The body learned how to respond, how to heal, how to adapt. Modern health culture often focuses on adding more supplements, more products, more programs, more interventions. Sometimes those things are valuable, but sometimes health comes from a different direction. Sometimes health emerges not from adding something new, but from creating space. Space for recovery, space for repair, space for biological processes that have been waiting patiently for an opportunity to work. There is also an interesting historical observation worth considering. In the Theravada Buddhist tradition during the lifetime of the Buddha, monks typically consumed food once a day and followed the rule of avoiding meals after midday. This practice was established for spiritual and disciplinary reasons rather than modern health science. Can we say that ancient Buddhist practices were intentionally designed as intermittent fasting? Science cannot make that claim. The purposes were different. The historical context was different. However, it is fascinating that modern researchers are now discovering potential health benefits associated with eating patterns that, in some respects, resemble practices that have existed for thousands of years. Whether this is coincidence, wisdom born from observation, or a combination of many factors, remains an open question. What is certain is that human beings have experimented with periods of voluntary fasting for millennia. Today, science is helping us understand some of the biological mechanisms that may be involved. And perhaps that is one of the most beautiful aspects of scientific discovery. Sometimes it does not replace ancient practices, sometimes it helps explain them. As we conclude this journey, remember this: intermittent fasting is not a miracle. It is not a cure-all. It is not a substitute for sleep, exercise, nutrition, relationships, or purpose, but it may be a powerful tool, a simple tool, a tool that reminds us of something our ancestors understood instinctively. The body needs periods of nourishment and periods of rest. Both matter, both are essential, and both are part of the rhythm of life. In a modern world where food is always within reach, perhaps the most important nutritional skill is not knowing what to eat. It may be knowing when not to eat. Thank you for joining this entire journey. If you enjoyed this series, please like this video and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss future explorations into the science that is quietly transforming everyday life. Share your thoughts in the comments. Which idea surprised you the most? Which discovery changed the way you think about food, health, or aging? And if you believe this series could help someone you care about, please share it with them. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and remember that some of the most powerful health discoveries are not found in what we add to our lives, but in what we allow our bodies the time to do on their own.